Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
We are in the 5th chapter of the book of Shemot. We're in the middle of a Rashi on verse 9. So we're going to read the verse to get us going, and then we'll jump into it. This is a long Rashi on one Hebrew root, right? This is like if you read Torah and Rashi for meaning mostly, for inspiration, for wisdom, this is not the Rashi for you. If you read Torah also for precision and want to know what every letter stands for, this is a really a classic Rashi for explaining why it does mean this and why it doesn't mean that. Okay, verse 9. Tichbad ha'avodah al anashim. This is still in Pharaoh's voice about the Israelites to the taskmasters. Let the work be kaved, heavy, burdensome, al hanashim, on the men, on the people. V'yasuva, and they'll do it. V'al yishu b'divrei shaker, and they will not show whatever that means. Okay, because that's the question. They will not shin ayin hey. It doesn't mean hour in this case, at the length of time. They will not show with respect to near words of falseness, words of lying or words of nothingness. Right. The first thing that Rashi said is that what he thinks this means is that the root yishu has to do with speech. Right. We won't go through the whole Rashi, but he says it's as if he's saying, V'al yehagu v'yidabru tamid b'divrei ruach. They should not continue to speak lahagot v'yidabru l'daber, to talk about all the time divrei ruach, things of nothingness, things like flights of fancy, like, oh, let's go into the desert and worship our God. I want them to be working. I don't want them to have the time to fantasize, right? And then what we did last time is go through all the other places in the Bible where either directly the root shin ayin hey has to do with speech, or indirectly another root which is clearly about speech is translated by uncleus into Aramaic with the shin ayin hey root. So it's like a half proof text. And the last thing he said, we got to it about 4 lines in. The Efshar Lomar, it's impossible to say the al yishu, that the phrase they shall not show lashon vayisha Adonai el Hevel. It's not from the language of the story of Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel, where God paid attention to Hevel's offering, and with respect to Cain's offering, he did not show he did not pay attention to. Don't read it that way. Rashi is saying, don't read it that the Israelites shall not pay attention to words of falsehood. Ula faresh, and to therefore explain the al yishu, they shall not show al yifnu, they shouldn't turn to, pay attention. She'im kain, had that been the case, hagalu lichtov bi al yishu el. It would have been that the preposition after the verb would have been el, or to. L'divrei sheker, ki came gizrat kulam. Gizrat is Rashi's way of saying like the rule or the protocol or the formula. Now, the formula for this root, when it means paying attention to or turning to, you need the full preposition to, either in el or le. But since in this case the preposition is a b, and even though b means many things, and sometimes b means to, it doesn't mean that here. That's where he left off, and now he's going to give us the proof text for kind of in the other direction, where shin ayin hey does mean paying attention to. It's with an al and not a b. Okay, that's where we got. So that was just the background. Any questions on where we are so far? Okay, so let's see. Leonard or Rebecca, does one of you want to pick up kind of halfway through the Rashi where he starts giving examples, and basically you're going to be reading them, and I'm going to be pulling them up on the screen so everyone can see them, for when the preposition el is connected to this verb.
You're unmuted.
Well,
I'm muted?
No, you're unmuted.
I'm unmuted. Okay, so I'm sorry, where am I starting?
The words Yisheh Hadam al Osehu. I'm looking at it. Let me just tell you exactly where we are in that.
Okay, I got a different book where I can find it. All right. Yisheh Hadam al Osehu.
Okay, so basically you're just going to read it, and I'm going to pull up the screen, because what Rashi is doing here is showing a lot of different verses. So here we are, Isaiah chapter 17, verse 7. Bayom hahu, on that day, Yisheh ha'adam, same root, a person or man will sho'eh al osehu. They will speak about or turn to their maker. That's the turning towards. Ve'inav el kadosh Yisrael tirena, and their eyes will look to the Holy One. So you want sho'eh to mean turn to or pay attention to? Fine. Just put an al or an el or a le after it. Next one.
Lo yish'eh hamizbechot.
I think you skipped one.
I did. Yisheh ha'adam osehu velo yisheh el hamizbechot. That's what I have.
Oh, okay. We have an. Is that the one that we have in the Torah Chaim?
I'm not looking at the Torah Chaim at the moment.
Okay, so there's one more that's thrown in. Velo sha'u al kadosh Yisrael, and I'll show you where that is from.
Yeah, they reverse the order in my book here.
Yeah, my Silverman has it the other way.
Got it. Okay. Velo sha'u al kadosh Yisrael. This is the 31st chapter of Isaiah. Hoi hayodim Mitzrayim. Hey, wake up, all those who descend into Egypt looking for salvation. Le'ezra, for help. Al susim yisha'enu. So interesting, Rashi quotes the phrase later in the verse, could have quoted this verse. They sho'eh on horses, right? They rely on, they turn to, they put their trust in. V'yiftechu al rechev. They trust in the chariots. Ki rav, because there are many of them. Bial parashim, and the chariot riders. Ki atzmu ma'od, because they're very impressed with how strong these chariot riders are. V'lo sha'u al kadosh Yisrael, but they don't sho'eh. They don't rely on, depend on, turn towards the Holy One of Israel. Again, an example, you want sho'eh to mean turn to? Fine. You need a different preposition. Go ahead.
So now you want the lo yisheh el mizbechot?
Yes. And you just did it. Good. But what's interesting about the way Rashi performs this is that, at least in our book, Rashi quotes from Isaiah chapter 17, verse 7. Then he quoted from Isaiah 31. And then now he goes back to Isaiah 17, verse 8. I don't know why he didn't do those two right together. Because in the next verse, Velo yisheh el hamizbachot, that these, that the people, this is a negative, should not turn towards the handmade, Maseh Adav, their own handmade altars. They're only supposed to go to the altar in Jerusalem. Okay? Next one.
V'lo matzati shimush shel bet smucha le'achareichem.
Okay, so what does that mean?
I have not found the use of the letter bet connected after them, after sha'ah. So in other words, you didn't say sha'ah beh.
Right. So in all of these, dear reader, where the sha'ah means turning to and paying attention, he's basically saying, did you find a bet? I didn't see a bet. No bet to be found. The al el la, all the lamed ones, not the ba. Aval, and what it's about to do, I will tell you, is it's a very strange. It strikes me as a very strange strategy, given how Rashi normally makes his arguments from different sources in the Tanakh, and you'll tell me if you agree or not. Aval achar.
Aval achar lashon dibur. Kimitasek ledaber bedavar. Nofel lashon shimush bet.
Okay, what does that phrase mean?
All right. After the word speaking, one who is engaged in speaking of a matter, nofel lashon shimush bet. So the bet is used, I guess?
Yeah, it's sort of it's sometimes really hard to understand Rashi's words when he's writing a sentence about grammar because he used different words to refer to grammatical forms than we do. You're very close. It's something like Lashon Dibor does not mean the word Dibor, but the usage, the language. After a word, which is either the word Dibor or the word that means speaking, mitasek ledaber b'davar, when we're talking about somebody who is speaking about something else, in that case, nofel lashon shimush bet. You do have a bet as a preposition afterwards. What's interesting about his case here is that the proof text he's going to bring up is not where there's a bet in between a verb and another thing, and therefore that means speech, but where there's a bet after the root davar, right? Kegon.
Kegon. Hold on one second here. Hanidbarim becha.
Okay, so look at the screen. This is chapter 33 of Yechezkel, Ezekiel. Ve'ata ben adam, hey mortal person, b'nei amcha, hanidbarim becha, all of the people of your nation who are, it's a weird form of ledaber. Like how do you put ledaber into a nifal, right? Usually a nifal is something happening to you, but speech can't happen to you. But when davar is in a nifal, nidbar, and there is a b afterward, it somehow refers to being spoken about you. Hey, human, when your fellow countrymen speak about you, blah, 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 blah. I forget about the context of Ezekiel. Here we have the preposition ba. It's after the root ledaber, and it has to do with speaking about. Okay, keep going.
Ve'tedaber Miriam ve'Aharon be'Moshe.
Okay, this is from Balotcha, when Miriam speaks ill of her brother. So, ve'tedaber Miriam ve'Aaron be'Moshe. So Miriam and Aaron spoke not to, not next to, but about. Right? There was a lashon hara about Moshe. Okay, next one.
Hamalach hadover bi.
Zechariah chapter 4. Vayashav hamalach hadover bi. The angel who had spoken with me, who had addressed me, returned. Okay, this is after Zechariah had like a dreamlike experience. Fine. And last one, I think.
I have two more.
Oh, okay.
Ledaber bam.
Right. Most of you know these words. He could have chosen the one directly from the Ahavta v'dibar tabam. He chose from the second paragraph of the Shema. You shall teach your children this, ledaber bam, that they should speak of it. Not that they should say the words directly, but that they should speak about it. Right. There's one more.
Ve'adabra be'edotecha.
Okay, Psalms 119. This is the longest of the book of Psalms, where it's several alphabetic acrostics all moved into one. Ve'adabra ve'edotecha. I will speak about, I will investigate your statutes, your decrees, neged melachim below evosh, and I will not be ashamed in the presence of kings. All of that together, go ahead.
Afkan, al yishu b'divrei shaker, al yihiyu nidbarim b'divrei shav v'havai. Okay, that makes sense.
You try to translate that?
And here, but here
in our case, where the connective thread, and this is what speak about it, is just a preposition b, right? He hasn't shown us 5 places in Tanakh where the root sha'ah had the preposition b and it meant speak about. He's just saying that sometimes the preposition b, when used with the root that means speak, means to speak about. That's what I'm saying is kind of a weak proof text. But here, even in our case, where we have the phrase al yishu b'divrei shaker, that they should not sho'eh with respect to words of shaker. What it means is
don't speak about words of falsehood. Don't be spoken about.
Yeah, he's now using the nifal of dibur, and I guess the best way to render it to English is don't be overly involved in, don't be caught up in, don't be caught in the extended speech about divrei shav v'havai, words of vanity and nothingness. So usually when Rashi sends us on a chase around the Tanakh, even though he brings us to places that we've never necessarily paid attention to before, the proof text, the pathway is clear. You don't know what this verse means here? I'll bring you to a place where it's clear. Here, it's actually not clear, because he doesn't have other places in the Tanakh where the root sha'ah has the preposition b after it with the word davar, meaning to speak about. But he's trying to build a case that whenever you have the root davar and a preposition but either before it or after it, it has to do with not just saying specific words, but being involved with speaking about. This does in some way shed some light onto the oddity of how Onkelos translated this verse to remind us, we looked at this last time, that Onkelos in verse 9 used the same Aramaic root, ayin samach kuf, meaning to be busy with, to be involved with, both to describe their obligations to do their work, that is vayitaskun ba, they should get to their work, but he also translates the al yishu b'divrei shaker, let them not pay attention, may not be involved in words of nothingness, with the same root, v'la yitaskun b'pidgamin b'telim. They shall not busy themselves with, be all caught up in statements that have no worth. After this whole Rashi, what's he accomplished? I don't know. Would it have been so bad for us to read this sentence as they shall not pay attention to or lean into words of vanity? It's the same basic meaning, but Rashi would be upset that we mistook the precise way of reading this verb, and he's a stickler for precision. Okay. If anyone is asleep, you can wake up because maybe now it'll get interesting. Norman, Rachel?
We went by it pretty fast, but I think if you go back to Yechezkel 33:30, that there were two uses of davar, and if I'm not mistaken, one with a base and one without, following it in the next word.
Okay. So you want me to let's see if I can pull that one up again. 1 second. I closed that window. Here we go. Okay, walk us through it, Norm, what you were saying?
Yes, there's V'diber Chad, and I guess that was the only one. My mistake. Sorry.
No, well, we have both. We have the Nidbarim B'cha. That's
right.
What he was saying, yeah.
There's B'cha, and then in the very next line, V'diber Chad.
Right. So what Rashi's pulling from this is that the diber chad et achad is related to direct speech. One spoke to the other. He's not saying that explicitly, but it's implicit. Whereas the nidbarim b'cha is a more general notion of people speaking about other people. People get involved in speech. Yeah.
And the base makes sense where Alamid wouldn't, because it was l'cha would mean to you, not about you.
Correct.
Or of you.
Correct. Good.
Thank you. So I did have
that. So after spending so much time on this, I'm working to try to make a purpose why we're doing this. So here's my spin. Rather than think of the Israelites already having a God that they would go pay attention to, don't let them go and get caught up in this. Something that they're not already attuned to.
Yeah, I think the getting caught up in is a good English idiomatic expression of what Rashi wants us to think of in this phrase, which is subtly different than turning to and relying on, right? The proof text that Rashi brought that he wants us not to think of in this verse is a reliance, And a reliance is a little stronger than being caught up in, overly involved with, distracted by, right? And that's how Rashi wants us to read this, in Pharaoh's fear about what will happen if the Israelites, God forbid, are given a chance to break out and dream a little bit.
I'm suggesting a positive thing, that Pharaoh is saying the Israelites don't yet have this belief. Don't let them get into a place where they'll get caught up into this belief.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so we can put that aside and then move to the next verse. Rebecca and Leonard, since you got a half Rashi, do you want to read the next verse?
Okay. 10. Vayitzu nogsei ha'am v'shotrav vayomru el ha'am lemor ko amar paro eineni noten lechem teven. And the taskmasters of the people went out, and the overseers, or the whatever, and said to the people, saying, "Thus says Pharaoh, I am not going to give you straw."
Good. All right, so this verse reminds us that up until now, we've been hearing Pharaoh address his own people, right? His own taskmasters, unless, some of the taskmasters were like the capos and they were Israelites who were put in charge. But he wasn't addressing the Israelites. He was addressing the people who supervise the Israelites. And and it was a long speech, right? Pharaoh was speaking from, starting with verse 4. Verse 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 were all Pharaoh speaking to the taskmasters, telling them what was going to happen next to make the Israelites' experience even more harsh. And then the taskmasters take their instructions and they go out. This is a relatively common biblical format that we wouldn't use so much in English, where you have the verb and then you have two subjects afterwards. So they went out. Who went out? Nogsei ha'am, the taskmasters of the people, Vishotrav, and the people's officers or the people's supervisors. And this is what they said. So said Pharaoh, I'm not going to give you any more tevin. In terms of the flow of the story, it would make sense to just read the next verse right afterwards, which we're going to do in a second anyway, because there's no Rashi on this verse, because that's obviously not the only thing that they said. Because for the message to be, we're not giving you any more straw, unless that is attached to, and you still have the same set of obligations to produce, it's not much of a punishment, right? So in narrative, the next verse really it has to come quickly after this verse. But let's just pause for a second and see what Rick, Diane, and Larry are thinking of, and then we'll read the next verse. Again, Rashi's quiet on this verse anyway.
Hi. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
So, not to belabor the point, but the trope helps with foreshadowing of what's coming up. Back in 7, we had Ham, Yelchu, they're going to go out, and now all on one word, the Kadma V'Azla, they're going out. They didn't have to put that in there. You don't need that word for the story. They could have just said, the taskmasters said to the people. But going out, I think, is foreshadowing, or I think that's the word, of the Exodus. And then I like the Eineni. In my mind, that bounces off all the hinenis that we have here. Pharaoh is saying, I'm not going to be there for you for the Tevin. So I like that as well. But anyway.
Thanks, Rick.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, if the first comment that Rick made, if it went a little too quickly for everybody, that the trup on the first word of the verse is almost always on two different words, because it's actually a several note trup, kadma biazla, da 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 da, depending on how you sing it. and both of them are put on one word. So if you wanted to be precise, you'd have to read it as Vayetzeu, something like that.
It intensifies it when it's all on one word.
Yeah,
is my theory.
Great, Diane, Larry.
Sorry. So first of all, just a small point. I think it's only on verse 6 that that the Pharaoh turns and talks to the taskmasters. Verses 4 and 5, he's still talking to Moses and Aaron, I think.
Correct.
And,
so Pharaoh's been talking all this time, but only the last verse is to the taskmasters. I appreciate the correction.
And it's interesting. So I disagree with Rick. I think the Vayetzu is necessary. It's not a stage direction, but it's telling us that this all took place in the palace, and now the taskmasters said go out, and they're talking to the people. And it's interesting what they say to the people, and we're going to get to the next sentence, next verse in a minute. But they're telling the people what Pharaoh told them, which is in this verse, they will not give you any straw. And in the next verse, that they have to make it themselves and that there will be no decrease. But what they don't tell the people is the explanation at all. They don't say, because you are shirkers, or because in all the discussion we've been having about listening to lying words, etc. So they don't give any of the commentary, which makes perfect sense. Because why would you want to make it any more complicated? You're just giving the simple instructions.
Yeah, not only, as we'll see in a second, does Pharaoh, do the taskmasters not pass along that it's because you're shirkers, nor do they pass along that this is in response to your own leaders having made the request that you leave, right?
Exactly.
So there are a lot of ways of reading that. Of course, arguments of omission are endless, but you can imagine that if a tyrant wanted to sow yet more discord amongst the people so that they would be less unified, they would pit one against the other and say, why is this harder? I wouldn't have made it harder on you, but your own leaders made a ridiculous request, and my response to that is to redouble your obligations. And that's not present, and we don't know why it's not present, right? But it wouldn't have surprised us had it been present, had the taskmaster said, this is the fault of Moses and Aaron. Norm, Rachel, is your hand up again? Or still?
Yes. No, it's again. Okay. I have two comments about that particular aspect. Giving a reason invites people to disagree or try to disprove the reason. Yeah. They have a conclusion, they want to give that. And second, I think it's possible the taskmasters, the supervisors, they knew how hard the Israelites were working. They didn't want to say it's because you're not working hard enough and you're being idle, because they knew that's false. Mm. So it's one thing not to stand up to Pharaoh, but it's a different thing to pass along his falsehoods. So they say, hey, you're not getting straw anymore. You've got to collect your own straw. You're still going to have the same requirements, but they're not going to say it's because of you, because they know it's not because of you. And they don't want to be caught up in that.
That's
my theory.
That's a fascinating read, Norm. I'm really moved by that. Because the taskmasters, right, it's almost imputing a little bit of reluctant, begrudging humanity to the taskmasters, that they're caught. I was just following orders, and I'm not going to communicate the perverted thinking behind this. But I have to tell you that this is your new set of obligations. That's interesting read. Thank you for that. Okay. Let's keep going, because again, we're only halfway through the material that the taskmasters are communicating to the Israelites. Keep going, Leonard.
So Atem lechu, that's where we are?
Yeah, verse 11. Okay,
verse 11. Atem lechu, k'chu lechem teven me'asher timtzau, ki en nigra me'avodatchem davar. So you should go out and get for yourselves straw, wherever you find it.
Okay, good.
Because there will be no diminishment, or you cannot diminish from you the amount of work that you are doing at all.
Yeah, the way you translated that in some ways brings even more color to Norm's read, as if to say, listen, Israelites, at this point, go get it wherever you could possibly find it. because it's just the case that you still are going to have the same obligations to produce, and you could almost read this with 1/8 of a sympathetic tone, right? Start now. Go. I wish this weren't the case. Start now. Go find it wherever you can, because your obligations are exactly as they were beforehand. I want to just read to you Everett Fox's translation of this verse, because he careful with the language. He says, "You go, comma, get yourselves straw, comma, wherever you can find," and then he puts the it and it in parentheses, because there's no direct object in the verse, right? It's not me'asher timtsa'u oto, or timtsa'un or timtsa'u. So he puts the it in parentheses. Indeed, another interesting choice. Indeed, not one, and he puts a parentheses the word load. Not one load is to be subtracted from your servitude. It's an interesting way of doing it, because he's saying that the ein nigra is missing the noun. What is not going to be reduced from your service? It's not that the service isn't reduced, but one allotment or one amount. So he puts in the word, not one load is to be subtracted from your servitude.
Well, isn't it davar that's being subtracted?
Yeah. Why does he put load in parentheses? Not one thing. Yeah, I don't know. How does Aryeh Kaplan translate it, Larry?
Kaplan's translation is, you must go and get your own straw wherever you can find it. Meanwhile, you may not reduce the amount of work you must complete, which I will tell you I don't like.
No, it's a real weak paraphrase.
And Alter says, as for you, comma, fetch yourself straw wherever you find it, comma, because not a thing is to be deducted from your work. I don't like that either. Can I make a comment?
Yeah. Although I agree, I think it's better than Kaplan in that situation.
No, but here's the way I would translate it, is y'all must go and get for yourselves straw wherever you can find it. I'm going to say find it, but now I want to say a word about find. I want to say three things. One is, I just love the atem lechu kechu lechem. I like that poetry. Mm. So there's three verbs, and they're all verbs referring to the people. Lechu, kechu, and timsa'u. And the timsa'u, I think, but you're going to correct me maybe, is actually active. In English, we have a problem with the word find, because find can be an active verb, to find something, to actually hunt it out, to go and look around, to take a lot of time in order to seek it out. But it also can be, I don't know if it's passive, but you found it. There it is. I find it. Where you find it sort of indicates that it's there. But I think that what this phrase is saying, you guys have to take a lot of time. First, go out there. And then you have to go get the straw. You have to get it. But how do you get it? You're going to have to search. And all of these things are taking time. And it's this time that will not be decreased from your work. All the actions that you're doing are things that you're going to have to do in addition to making the bricks. Mm. Now, how you would translate that in a way that emphasizes that, I don't know what word I'd use instead of find, seek it out, something like that instead. And I would actually put in parentheses the word time in the second part of the pasuk.
Huh. I'm still not sure I understand your distinction between the two ways that we use the word find in English, active versus non-active. Can you say that again?
Finding, if you to find something can be to seek it out. You actually are looking for something. Go find the hidden treasure. It's going to take a long time to find it. But when you say where you find it can be, you simply happen upon it. There it is. You're not actually working to seek it out. You just observe it.
Find meaning search versus find meaning locate.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, Diane?
So I want to look at something else, which is there's a hint here that maybe Pharaoh is interested in something besides punishing the Israelites, and that's scattering them. because they are a rebellious bunch. And one way of diffusing a rebellion is to force the people to scatter.
Yeah, and the scattering is going to indeed come in the next verse, literally, right? Good. Before we get to Barry, there was one thing you said. It's so interesting, your comment, Larry, on the lyricism of Atem Lechu Kechu Lachem. I never would have picked up on it because I'm so influenced by the trup that I use the trup as an indication for what the verse would sound like. And the trup totally breaks up that lyricism. The trup is Atem Lechu Kechu Lachem Teven. In that music, you don't have the Atem Lechu Kechu Lachem. But if had it been Merchat Tibcha Munachat Nachta to begin the verse, Atem Lechu Kechu Lachem, you would have heard it. So kol hakavod for you for hearing it, even though it's not sung that way. And I don't know if it means anything, but I do think that it seems to be more than an accident, this little almost chiastic reverse structure. Atem parallel with lachem, lechu and kechu. But I didn't see it because I look at the verse and unconsciously the trup is telling me the flow. So I appreciate your pointing that out.
I just say that I'm surprised that Alter actually translates it that way too. But it shows that he probably is also influenced by the trope because he says, as for you, taking the atem with a reviyah,
right,
completely separate from everything else.
For laning Jews or for laning appreciative Jews, it's hard not to be impacted by the trup. We're so conditioned, like, to think of the trup as integral to the meaning of, integral to the verse as the words themselves. And again, it was an overlay. It's an old overlay. It's a revered overlay, but it's just an overlay. It has no more authority than, Everett Fox's translation of the Torah versus, what's his name? The other one, Aryeh Kaplan's, right? It's a way of understanding these syllables, but not the only way. Barry.
I'm influenced by the power of poetic structure. In verse 9, we spend so much time on b'divrei shaker, and now there's an unnecessary ending in 11 with the word davar. So let's not have them get caught up in these ideas. And final kick, davar.
Yeah, the davar, which gets sort of untranslated by Everett Fox, at least.
It seems unnecessary, but there's a poetic power to it. Yeah. This is the final kick.
Right. So the way to make it necessary would almost be to put the davar in front of the word ein, and it had to be ki davar ein or ein. Well, you could put it anywhere because biblical grammar, these are interchangeable. But ein davar nigram avodachem, not one thing, because davar means thing in addition to word, is reduced from your obligations, from your servitude. But as it is hanging out there at the end, not knowing where to put it, it does kind of awaken the divrei sheker from verse 9. Thank you for that. Okay, Rashi had nothing to say in verse 10, but he does have some things in verse 11. I'm going to call on someone else, Leonard and Rebecca, just to share the burden here. Who have we not heard from? Joanne, are you at a place where you can read?
Sure.
Okay.
We're on Yud Aleph 11?
Correct.
Atem lechu kechu lachem teven me'asher timtza'u ki ein nigra me'avodatchem davar. So you go and take for yourself.
Joanna, 1 second, because that's the verse. Just we're at the Rashi's of the verse.
Oh, we're at the Rashi. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, I was like, didn't we read that already? Okay. Yes, Rashi. So again, the Dibor Matril atem lechu kechu lachem teven utrichim atem lelech bizrizut, and you need to go quickly. You need to take care of this quickly.
Right. So here's the the question we always ask on a Rashi, which at first glance looks like he's not saying anything because what he's saying is implicit in the verse. So Rashi's commentary on this phrase, this half of the verse is, you need to go zrizut, with alacrity, with speed. So my question to Joanna and anyone else is, what is he saying beyond just paraphrasing? We like to believe that Rashi is never just paraphrasing. He's disabusing us of a notion. He's adding a layer of commentary. He's adding an image. If the words are, go get yourself straw, and what he adds to it is, I need you to go quickly, why is he adding that, and what does his addition say about his understanding of the verse? Anyone?
I mean, I think it's only like sort of a doubling up on this idea that their workload will not be lessened, because now in the same amount of time, you have to go gather the straw in order that ein nigra me'avodatchem.
I think you're exactly right. I think without saying this explicitly, he's saying, reader, you know that I tell you that certain words like prepositions and words like ki can mean lots of different things, and ki doesn't always mean because. But here, ki means because, right? He's connecting, I believe, the first half of the verse and the second half of the verse. You need to go yourself straw. Why? There's a reason. The reason you need to go, and go quickly. And if we bring in Norm's comment before, this is either said with extra harshness or even a tiny hint of sympathy. Run! I have Rahmanas on you, because, in fact, you're not going to have any reduction of your obligations, and you've got to start at 4 a.m. rather than 6 a.m. Right? So start now. Joel, Leonard, Rebecca?
I was just going to say, I think he's commenting on the meaning, the necessity of the word lechu. He doesn't say chu, it's a lechu, meaning go now.
Got it. Good. That could be in addition to or instead of what I just said. Very possible that it's just a commentary on a doubling of a verb when you only needed one. Chu means go. Lechu kfu, run to get it. Great. Leonard, Rebecca?
I think what Rashi's doing here is he's just, usually when he makes a comment on something, it stands alone, but here it's just half the sentence. And if you look at the Torah Chaim, you can see at the end of the comment, there isn't a period, there's a comma. It's just flowing into the next, the two comments go together in one sentence.
Very possible, right? Sometimes Rashi uses the next set of words in a verse, not as its own dibur hamachil. That's the phrase that Joanna used, the proper phrase for saying it's the words that mean the words that are quoted in the Rashi text, but as if Rashi's comment is to be read more fluidly, in which case you would read it all together. Atem lachu kulachem teven, utzrichim atem lelech b'zrizut, ki ein nigra ma'avodatchem davar. Right? And the reason why you got to go quickly is because nothing is going to be reduced from your load. Let's also keep reading ourselves and go right into the next one, Joanna. I had muted you because it was very loud in the background when you weren't talking.
Ki ein nigra davar mikol schum levenim shayitem osim layom biyot hateven nitan lachem mizuman mi beit hamelech. So it will not be the amount will not be lessened from the amount of bricks that you used to do every day, from the straw that was given to you from the allotment that was in Beit HaMelech, that was in Pharaoh's, I guess, warehouse.
Good. Mizuman, just to pause on that, is an interesting word. What does mizuman mean in modern Hebrew?
An invitation.
Right. The Zayin Mem Nun is one of the most multiply used roots in biblical and modern Hebrew. When would an Israeli most often hear the word mizuman in common parlance? Do you know? Mizuman in modern Hebrew mostly means cash, dollars that are or shekels that are available. Right? You can say, that this, this place accepts both, kartisha shrai and mizuman. You can pay in credit card or cash. Why does mizuman mean cash? Mizuman means cash because what is cash? It's ready, available currency. It's here right now. It's not a promissory note. It doesn't have to go through a transaction. It's the most direct transfer of a financial instrument, because mizuman means ready. We know that because we're in the middle of the Omer. Hineni muchan umezuman. Hineni muchan umezuman. So muchan and muzuman in that lead up to performing a mitzvah is essentially synonyms. We are ready and prepared, or we are prepared and available. Totally. Now, how that connects to zman, is it connected to the notion of time, like mizuman? I'm here now because I'm present in time, or is it related to the use of zman that means to invite, like lehazmin is to bring someone to something, to have them be present and available. They're all related to each other. What it means in not a verse, in Rashi's comment is that mikol schum levenim, the entire allotment of bricks, shayitem osim layom, that you had been doing up until now, biyot atevin. Here the biyot is actually, believe it or not, means when. I mean, literally, in the being of the straw, but it means when. Back when the straw, nitan lachem, had been given to you, mizuman, ready, available, cash, it's right here, mi beit hamelach, from Pharaoh's storehouse. Right? So it's creating a picture that used to be, Israelites had to build all these things, but their first stop every day was to go to the place where the tevin had been stored, pick up their bale or whatever and go do their work. Now, from that is no longer going to be available to them. It's no longer going to be mizuman, but they still are going to have the same obligations upon them. Okay. Comments, questions on Rashi's treatment on the verse itself, on the image, on the language, before we go forward? All right. Let's go where I'm not used to hitting a third verse we're on the fourth verse of our class today. We started halfway through verse 9. We're breaking records. Joanna, keep going and read verse 12. This is the verse that Diane anticipated with this notion of dispersal.
Vayafet ha'am b'chol eretz Mitzrayim lekoshesh kash lateven. The nation scattered throughout all of the land of Egypt in order to gather straw for the bricks.
Good. Now, I want to linger on that verb vayafetz because it's a little bit harder to make sense of than it looks. The root is nun pei sari, to disperse. Unafutzotenu kanes, those who have been dispersed, God, bring them in, kanes. And as we discussed before, many times, in a vavaipuch or in a future verb, the nun of the root falls out, so nofel becomes vayipol. Nashak kiss means vayishak, and that the dagesh in the yud of vayafetz is a reminder that there was once another letter there. That's the nun. But does anyone notice anything? This is going to see how grammar nerdy you are. Anything interesting about the vowels in this verb vayafetz that tells us about how we should understand the meaning of this particular word? One of those vowels is an interesting vowel. All right, I'll tell you. The kamatz under the yud changes the verb from a pa'al, future tense vaypuch, to something more like a hifil. Because if you're saying that something dispersed, it would be vayifetz, or if someone dispersed something else, it would be vayifetz. Vayafetz is something like, it's really hard to make sense of in English, that the nation caused a dispersal throughout the land of Egypt. Not that they dispersed, but they caused one. It's in the causative, which makes Uncle Liss's translation really interesting and also goes back to Diane's point. Uncle Liss does not take the opportunity to render this in an Aramaic word that means to disperse, and certainly doesn't do it in this causal form. But he says, V'itbadad. Is that V'itbadad or V'itbadar? One second, my eyes are deceiving me.
I think it's a resh.
Oh, it's a resh. My whole comment was based on it being a dalet because it's such a small letter, I couldn't see it. V'itbadar. V'itbadar. I have to remind myself what badar means in Aramaic. Hold on a second. I was reading it on the Itbadad, that they kind of went out and in a lonely way, because badad means isolated or lonely. Let's see what Jastrow says about badar, because I don't remember that root. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Let me show this to you. So badar. It's less interesting than I thought. I'm so disappointed. It means to scatter and to strew. What does it mean in the hitpa'el? Itpa'el, to be scattered, to disperse. God, I thought I was onto something. So funny. It's a smaller text than the regular one, and I saw a dal instead of a resh. So Onkelos does it exactly as it is in the Hebrew, but even so, he turns it into a hitpa'el, something that's happening to the people rather than just a straight verb. And why it's vayafetz and not vayifetz, I'm not sure. But it is a slightly more interesting verb form than it had to be. Okay. I see Joel, Dan, Larry, and then Leonard, Rebecca.
I think it's probably related to the word bidur, like in a diversion.
Yes, probably. Diane, Larry?
So one thing I want to talk about the translation of lekoshesh kash latevin, which is Diane mentioned to me, is the koshesh kash is also alliterative and therefore poetic and trickles off the tongue. The JPS translation is to gather stubble for straw, which I don't think captures much of anything at all. And the
it's alliterative.
Gather stubble for wait.
Stubble for straw.
Wait till I get to the altar. And Kaplan says to gather grain stalks for straw. That's nicer. To gather grain stalks for straw. But altar has a great one, I think. And the people spread out through all the land of Egypt to scrabble for stubble for straw.
That is great, actually.
Showing, and this is what he does. Those of you who read altar recognize this, he takes a great deal of care where he can to try to capture poetry, alliteration, whatever, some sense of what the Hebrew is doing.
Yeah, that's great. It picks up the alliterativeness of Lekoshesh Kash. What it doesn't pick up, and I'm not faulting him for it, is that Hebrew way of having the verb and the noun being the same root, right? But Everett Fox tries to do that. The people scattered throughout all the land of Egypt. I'll come back to the people scattered in a second. Gathering, stubble gatherings for straw. So he puts the verb is gather. What are they gathering? Stubble gatherings, right? Because that's his koshesh kash, and it's a lovely attempt. No one speaks that way. But listen, no one speaks lekoshesh kash l'tevin in Hebrew either, right? Except for the Torah. Good. Linda, Rebecca, and then Barry. That'll probably be our last comment. Oh, Barbara, I say your hand up also. So all of you guys. First, Linda, Rebecca.
Okay, so I was looking up here, badar, and what's interesting is that the bet sometimes alternates with the pei, and the daled sometimes alternates with the zayin.
Okay.
Therefore, badar is the same word as pazar.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And if that didn't resonate for people, lefazer, pei zayin resh, is also a root that means a dispersal, not just a nafatz, but like a lefazer. Good. Barry?
I'm going back again to verse 9 in Pharaoh. It's the non-positives. Don't let them get caught up in. And here it's non-causative. They became dispersed. So the beginning of the structure was don't let them get caught up. It's brought together, and it ends up they were dispersed.
Say that a little bit differently. Yeah.
It began with the possibility that the Israelites would be gathered together. Brought together into false, he calls false, and it ends with them being dispersed, the opposite of being gathered.
Got it. Right. Thank you, Barry. Barbara, last comment?
Yeah, the Kash and the Teven, we've discussed this in the past. And I just wanted to remind you what Vered told me, which is why Kash is stubble. Kash is the dried up stuff that you're going to go pick. And they've been using Teven for straw, which is generally green. So they're saying, go get the Kash to be the straw, to be the substitute.
Good. And when we get to Rashi next week, he'll also weigh in a little bit about how Kash can mean both a very specific thing, which is different than Teven, and also a general category of stuff that is gathered for Teven. So I just gave a little bit, we gave away the store a little bit, but Rashi is going to go into that, and hopefully Vera can join us because she'll like that Rashi comment, and she'll be able to shed some.
I'll remind her.
Please do.
The other thing is in the book that's the Rashi commentary.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. The English translation, which we would never use, the way I see it, is so the people were scattered abroad throughout all the land of Egypt. That's like saying, so the people from Los Angeles were scattered abroad throughout the United States, which we wouldn't consider being abroad.
Exactly.
To us, abroad is to go to England or Israel.
Right. Or Macedonia.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.